Welcome back. This is another video for beginners, people who've just learned how to play chess all the way up to, I would say, about my level, but you don't know what my level is. My level is still a beginner, but with a lot more experience and a little bit of study behind me. But I still see this at my level all the time, that people, including me, don't notice what happens when a piece moves. And that sounds ridiculous, but all of us know that when a piece moves, it no longer occupies the square that it was on, and it now occupies a new square. That's the obvious part. The not obvious part is what else happens when a piece moves. For example, pawns, as we learned in the beginning, they can't go backward. That means that once you move it forward, you've permanently abandoned the square behind it, where it used to be. Permanently. Including the two squares diagonally in front of it that it used to guard. Other pieces, when they move, not only do they quit occupying one square and start occupying the new square, but they stop guarding or attacking what was previously guarded or being attacked. They get out of the way of something. That's how we come up with what's called discovered check, when a piece moves and it's no longer in the way of something. Sometimes they get in the way of something. And I've pulled up 3 quick examples to show from my own games within the last few months that illustrate these points. Now, this first game, I believe this was a daily game. Right here, it looks pretty complicated, but my general idea was that this bishop is pinned. And I have one piece attacking it. If I could bring another piece to a bear on it, then I can take it. So my idea was to bring my queen right down here to this square and have 2 attackers on this bishop. Take it with my rook, and if the opponent took back, then I would take back with the queen, and I would get a rook and a bishop for a rook. So that's what I did. I moved down here. Now, right now, the only thing under threat is the bishop. I don't know exactly what my opponent was thinking, but they had to have been thinking that all these pieces down here are guarded. The queen guards the rook and the knight, and the rook guards the bishop, and the knight guards this pawn. So all those pieces are safe. Obviously, the only piece under threat is this bishop. And I don't know what the correct answer would have been for them, because I think I'm going to win this bishop if they can't do it. If they make some random move like this, then I'm going to do my plan. If they try to protect the bishop, say by moving it here, well, then the rook's not protected anymore, and I will take it. But what my opponent did instead was first assured themselves that all those pieces were guarded, and then did this to attack my queen. And obviously, probably right after they moved that, they felt ridiculous. But at the time, they're thinking, hey, that spot's guarded by this knight, and now this queen's got to run. But what they didn't see is that now the queen's protection only extends this far. It does no longer guard the rook. Before the bishop move, the queen guarded the rook. After the bishop move, the queen does not guard the rook. So I got a free rook, and then obviously very soon after get the free bishop. So this is just a simple example to show you what people at my level miss all the time, is that this piece moving from here to here doesn't just move squares and attack something new. It also stops something else, and that is this guard of the rook. Okay, second example. In this game, this time it was my mistake. I was trying to get rid of this pesky knight here on f4, which is guarding all kinds of things here, causing all kind of trouble, putting pressure on pawns and squares all over the place. And so my idea is, how do I get rid of this? And this was not a daily game. This was rapid game. So I had about 6 minutes. I thought, what if I just kick it out here with this pawn? Where can it go? Like, I mean, probably there, right? But then I would just attack it again. And that has its own problems. But let's focus on this first move for a second. Now, I only spent 4 seconds on this move. Okay? The clock, oh, sorry, you can't see the clock, but it went from 6:04 to 6 minutes even. So 4 seconds I spent thinking, I can kick that knight out. But you have probably already seen what that pawn move does. Because currently, the pawn is guarding this pawn. It's also protecting my queen, but that's not quite so relevant. But also, even without that pawn, my queen is protecting this pawn. So in my mind, the pawn is protected. So the knight, that's one place the knight can't go. And if it goes here, I'll get it with my queen or bishop. If it goes here, I'll get it with my queen or bishop. If it goes here, I'll get it with my queen or king even. And as I said before, if it goes back there, I can maybe keep pushing with the pawn. So I did that. But now you see, now the queen doesn't protect this pawn anymore. And the pawn that used to be here doesn't protect it either. My opponent very quickly saw that. Very quickly, 9 seconds before they made that move. And now I'm in check. And I've lost a pawn. And I can't ever put this pawn back here to guard that square. Now, I went on to win this game, I believe. My opponent eventually resigned. But right here, I could have saved myself trouble by not moving this pawn. Because once it moves, it, again, doesn't guard that square, and it blocks the queen from guarding this square. Okay. Now, one final example is a little bit more complicated. And it involves a pattern that I learned from some tactical puzzles that I've been, like everybody else, practicing the tactics on chess.com, Lichess, and a couple of other apps I've tried on my phone and tablet. One of the tactics that I've seen over and over was a battery attacking a pawn down here and getting checkmate. Now, here in this game, which was also a rapid game, I believe, it might have even been a blitz. Oh yeah, this was a blitz game, 3-2. Okay, I saw my queen and rook lined up here, and I saw this pawn, but obviously I cannot do the checkmate pattern that I had seen in the puzzles because because this pawn's in my way, obviously, my own pawn. This bishop is guarding my destination square. This rook is guarding my destination square. And this queen is guarding my destination square. So, in a matter of just a few seconds, and I'm actually pretty proud of this, in a matter of a few seconds, I thought, what if I could remove those guards? Either deflect or decoy or trick those pieces into moving somewhere else, where this battery down here on the back rank and right in front of it can get here, force the king back, and somehow get checkmate. So, what I did was, I captured this knight here, because this queen, once it captured, would no longer be guarding this square. And sure enough, that came to pass. Then I moved this pawn forward, thinking I can get rid of my pawn one way or the other. If the bishop takes, well, then my pawn's out of the way. If the pawn takes, my pawn's out of the way. And I have enough pieces pointing right there that I can power my way through. Because again, I've already removed the queen. The queen has moved, so it's no longer guarding my destination. So the opponent took with the pawn. I recaptured with the knight. Now that was a little bit of a surprise. I honestly expected the bishop to come here. But either way, my pawn is no longer there. The opponent's pawn that retook is no longer there. Still, the queen is not guarding this square. And now they're trying to set up a battery of their own, but this has an added bonus for me. That rook used to guard this pawn, and it doesn't anymore. So I'm coming after the queen now. I'm not sure exactly why it moved there. Got my own knight out of the way here. And now look at this. Do you remember where we started? Excuse me. We're on move 21 now. But when we started, we were on move 14. And remember all these obstacles? 4 pieces guarding that square. Okay. That knight's gone, no longer guarding it. The queen's no longer guarding it. My pawn's out of the way. My opponent's pawn is out of the way. Now the rook's not guarding it anymore. Okay, and now, well, the king's not where it used to be, but still. Now I'm attacking this bishop. So it moves out of the way. And here, nothing remains between my battery and this. I had to move out of check. I had to move out of check again. And now nothing is between me and checkmate. That's checkmate. Okay. Now this one, like I said, I warned you that this one was more complicated. But again, the idea is that pieces, once they move, no longer do what they were doing. These pieces, 4 of them, well, the king too for that matter, was guarding that pawn. And I had a piece in the way. So the idea was to trick or deflect those pieces from those squares so that I could execute this plan, which I did. And it took more than a minute. At this point, I have 15 seconds on my clock, 13 seconds on my clock, 7 seconds on my clock, and 8 seconds. I had 8 seconds left. Oh, it was +2. That's why there was more for that last one than the previous one, because as soon as I moved my queen down there, I pre-moved this knowing that they had to capture with the rook. But anyway, the first 2 examples I think were easier to understand, that once a piece moves, it either gets in the way of something, as in the case here, or blocks some, here, it no longer guards what it was guarding, and it blocked my queen from guarding that square. And other things, let's see. What was my list? Pawns, they can't go backward. Once you've moved it, it can never occupy the square that it was on before. And it can never guard the 2 diagonal squares that it used to guard. Any piece that moves no longer guards or threatens what it guarded or threatened on its previous square. And any piece that moves gets out of the way of something. As you saw with that last example of mine, where I got my pawn out of the way, this pawn right here, it was in the way, so I had to get it out of the way. In this case, it was a positive for me to get these pieces to move so that I could execute my plan. But in the other cases, it's a negative when you forget what happens when a piece moves. So hopefully that was instructive. I feel like I've been paying more attention to this when I'm about to move a piece and think, wait, is it guarding something important right now? Or is it, is it in the way of something? If I move that piece, can one of my pieces be attacked? And same thing you have to see that with your opponent's pieces. Can you trick them into moving a piece out of the way of something, or to stop guarding what it used to guard? All right. See you next time.